The rushing water swept away everything in its path, and Lillian Evans knew she was next. The rainstorm had burst forth with a fury rarely seen in the Texas hill country, transforming placid creeks into raging torrents within hours. Now, as she clung desperately to the twisted branches of an oak tree partially submerged in the churning flood, her strength was fading fast. The year was 1878, and dying alone in a flood wasn't how she'd imagined her life would end at 23. "Help!" she screamed, though her voice was little match for the roar of the water. The branch she gripped groaned ominously, threatening to snap. Her sodden skirts weighed her down like an anchor, and her fingers were growing numb from the cold. "Please, somebody." Lillian had moved to Austin just 3 months prior, seeking a fresh start after her father's passing left her with little more than a trunk of belongings and enough money for a modest boarding room. She'd found work as a schoolteacher at the town's small schoolhouse, but remained largely a stranger to most of Austin's residents. Now, as the floodwaters rose around her, she wondered if anyone would even notice her absence. The branch dipped lower, and Lillian let out a desperate sob. She'd been returning from delivering medicine to an ailing student when the storm hit with unexpected ferocity. The bridge she'd crossed just that morning was gone, swept away like kindling, and she'd barely managed to climb the tree before the water engulfed the road completely. Just as her fingers began to slip, she heard the sound of hoofbeats, somehow cutting through the cacophony of the storm. Through the curtain of rain, a figure on horseback appeared on the hillside above the flooded creek bed. "Hold on," came a deep voice, somehow carrying over the rush of water. The rider guided his horse along the ridge, seeking a path down to where Lillian clung to life. She watched, hope and desperation mingling in her chest, as he dismounted and secured his horse to a tree before carefully making his way down the muddy embankment. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a rain-soaked duster. A cowboy hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could make out a strong jawline and determined expression as he studied the raging waters separating them. "I can't hold on much longer," Lillian cried, feeling the branch sink lower. Without hesitation, the stranger waded into the flood, gripping a rope he'd tied around his waist. The other end was secured to a sturdy tree on the bank. The water immediately pushed against him with violent force, but he fought against the current, his powerful arms cutting through the murky deluge as he moved toward her. Just as her fingers lost their grip on the slippery branch, he lunged forward, extending his arm across the final distance between them. "Grab hold," he shouted, his blue eyes locking with hers. Lillian reached out with the last of her strength, her fingers finding his forearm. His hand closed around her wrist with surprising gentleness despite the iron strength of his grip. "I've got you," he said, his voice somehow both gentle and powerful enough to be heard over the storm. "My name's Beau Mitchell, and I'm not letting go." The water swirled around them as he pulled her closer, wrapping a strong arm around her waist. Together, they fought against the current, Beau using the rope to guide them back to shore. When they finally reached the muddy embankment, Lillian collapsed, coughing up water and trembling from cold and exhaustion. "Thank you," she gasped, looking up at her savior. Rain streamed down his face, plastering dark brown hair to his forehead. Despite the danger they'd just escaped, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Couldn't leave a lady to the mercy of that flood," he said, helping her to her feet. "Can you ride?" Lillian nodded, though in truth she'd ridden only a few times. "My home is in town. I board with Mrs. Holloway on Pecan Street." "That's a fair distance," Beau said, glancing at the sky. "And this storm isn't letting up. My ranch is closer, just over that ridge. We should get you dried off and warmed up before you catch your death." The word ranch stirred a memory in Lillian's mind. Mitchell. You own the Double M, don't you? Beau nodded as he helped her up the slippery embankment. That's right. You know of it. The children talk about it. One of my students, Tommy Wilson, says you have the finest horses in the county. Tommy's got good taste, Beau said with a chuckle, reaching his horse and untying it from the tree. This is Jupiter. He'll carry us both. With impressive strength, he lifted Lillian onto the saddle before mounting behind her. She stiffened at the unfamiliar closeness, acutely aware of his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to take the reins. Sorry for the impropriety, Miss Evans. Lillian Evans, she supplied, fighting a blush despite the cold rain pelting them. And propriety seems rather trivial compared to drowning. His laugh was warm against her ear. You've got grit, Miss Evans. Hold tight now. As they rode toward the Mitchell ranch, Lillian couldn't help but wonder at the strange turn of events. She'd nearly died today, yet somehow found herself pressed against the most talked-about bachelor in Austin. Beau Mitchell was known not just for his successful ranch, but for his reluctance to participate in town socials or court any of the eligible young women. Some said he was devoted to his work. Others whispered about a broken heart in his past. All Lillian knew was that his arms felt secure around her, and for the first time since arriving in Austin, she didn't feel quite so alone. The Double M Ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling main house with a wide porch, flanked by several outbuildings and corrals. Even through the rain, Lillian could see it was well maintained, a testament to its owner's diligence. Hank, Daniel. Beau called as they approached the house. Two men emerged from the barn, rushing toward them through the downpour. Boss, we were getting worried, said the older of the two, his weathered face creasing with concern. The creek's overflowing its banks something fierce. This is Miss Evans, Beau explained as he dismounted, then reached up to help Lillian down. Found her about to be swept away. She needs dry clothes and something warm to drink. I'll fetch Martha, the younger man said, darting toward the house. Miss Evans, this is Hank, my foreman, Beau said. He'll show you inside while I see to Jupiter. Lillian wanted to protest after all. Beau was just as soaked as she was, but Hank was already ushering her toward the house. Inside, she found herself in a surprisingly comfortable great room with a large stone fireplace, where a fire blazed welcomingly. The furnishings were sturdy and masculine, but there were touches of refinement that surprised her. Books lining shelves along one wall, a piano in the corner, paintings of Western landscapes. A plump woman with graying hair hurried into the room, carrying a stack of clothing. Oh, you poor dear. I'm Martha, the housekeeper. Let's get you out of those wet things before you catch your death. Martha led Lillian to a bedroom at the back of the house, helping her peel off her sodden clothing. The older woman clucked sympathetically at the bruises already forming on Lillian's arms from her ordeal in the flood. Mr. Mitchell said you were nearly swept away, Martha said, helping Lillian into a dry cotton chemise and a simple dress that was slightly too large. It's a blessing he found you when he did. Indeed, Lillian agreed, wincing as she combed her fingers through her tangled hair. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't come along. He's got a knack for being in the right place at the right time, Martha said fondly. Been that way since he was a boy. Now, let's get some hot tea in you. When they returned to the great room, Beau had changed into dry clothing as well, simple trousers and a blue flannel shirt that brought out the color of his eyes. His hair was still damp, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. Feeling better, Miss Evans? He asked, rising from his chair by the fire. Much, thank you, she replied, suddenly shy under his direct gaze. And please call me Lillian. Lillian, he repeated, as if testing the name. I've had Daniel ride into town to let Mrs. Holloway know you're safe. The bridges are out, so you'll have to stay here tonight, I'm afraid. Oh, I couldn't impose, it's no imposition, Beau assured her. We've plenty of room, and it would be dangerous to try crossing back to town before the waters recede. Martha pressed a steaming mug of tea into Lillian's hands. Drink this, dear. It'll warm you through. As she sipped the sweet, hot liquid, Lillian studied her host. Up close, she could see that Beau Mitchell was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 29. His face was tanned from working outdoors, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled often, though his expression now was one of concern. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked. "That was a close call." "I'm fine, truly," she assured him. "Though I'm not sure what became of my hat." Unexpectedly, Beau laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Of all the things to worry about, I believe your hat is halfway to the Gulf of Mexico by now." Lillian found herself smiling in return. It wasn't a particularly becoming hat anyway. "I'll take your word for it," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Are you hungry? Martha makes a fine stew." As if on cue, Martha appeared with a tray bearing 2 bowls of fragrant beef stew and thick slices of bread. "Eat up, both of you." "Nothing like near drowning to work up an appetite, I always say." "Do you say that often, Martha?" Lillian asked, unable to resist teasing the kindly woman. "First time today," Martha replied with a wink, "but I might make it a saying if it gets you to eat." Throughout dinner, Lillian learned that Beau had inherited the double M from his father 5 years earlier. He ran cattle, but his true passion was horse breeding. He'd developed a reputation for producing some of the finest quarter horses in Central Texas. "And what brings you to Austin, Lillian?" Beau asked as they finished their meal. "Martha says you're teaching at the school." "Yes, since February," she confirmed. "I came from St. Louis after my father passed. He was a professor of literature, and I suppose teaching was in my blood." "I'm sorry about your father," Beau said sincerely. "Thank you, it's been an adjustment, but I'm grateful for the position here. The children are wonderful, even if some of the parents find my methods unconventional." "Unconventional how?" Beau asked, leaning forward with interest. Lillian hesitated, then admitted, "I believe girls should learn the same subjects as boys: mathematics, science, history, not just needlework and household management. And I encourage my students to question things, not simply memorize facts." She braced herself for the disapproving frown such statements usually earned her, but Beau merely nodded thoughtfully. "Education should be about learning to think, not just reciting what others have thought before you," he said. "My father believed that, though he had little formal schooling himself." "A wise man," Lillian replied, pleasantly surprised by his response. "He was," Beau agreed, a shadow of grief crossing his features briefly. "He'd have liked you." The simple statement warmed Lillian more than the tea or the fire. They continued talking as the storm raged outside, discovering shared interests in literature and a mutual love of Shakespeare. When Beau revealed a well-worn copy of Much Ado About Nothing on his bookshelf, Lillian's estimation of him rose even higher. "Beatrice and Benedict," she said, touching the book's spine reverently. "My father used to say they were proof that the most passionate love often grows from friendship and mutual respect, rather than simple attraction." "Your father sounds like he understood love better than most," Beau remarked. "He did," Lillian agreed softly. "He and my mother had a wonderful marriage, brief though it was. She died when I was 8. "I lost my mother young as well," Beau said, his voice gentle. "It leaves a mark, doesn't it?" Lillian nodded, touched by his understanding. As the evening progressed, she found herself increasingly drawn to this complex man, a rugged rancher with the soul of a scholar. capable of both physical bravery and intellectual curiosity. By the time Martha showed her to a guest bedroom, Lillian realized she'd spoken more freely with Beau Mitchell in one evening than she had with anyone since arriving in Austin. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with rushing water and strong hands pulling her to safety. She woke early, drawn by the smell of coffee and biscuits. Donning the borrowed dress once more, she made her way to the kitchen where she found Martha kneading dough. "Good morning, dear," the housekeeper greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well." "As well as could be expected after such excitement," Lillian replied. "Is Mr. Mitchell awake?" "Been up since dawn," Martha said, nodding toward the window. "He's out checking for damage from the storm. The men say Barton Creek's higher than they've seen in 20 years. Lillian helped Martha prepare breakfast, grateful for the opportunity to be useful. When Beau returned, his boots muddy and his expression grave, she knew the news wasn't good. "The bridge to town is completely gone," he reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Martha. "And the ford is still too dangerous to cross. We've got fences down along the south pasture, and the Wilsons' place downstream took heavy damage." "The Wilsons?" Lillian asked anxiously. "Tommy's family," Beau nodded. "Their safe got to high ground before the worst hit. But their cabin's half washed away, and they've lost most of their livestock." "Those poor people," Martha murmured. "They were just getting on their feet after Mr. Wilson's accident last year." "I've sent Hank and some of the boys to help them salvage what they can," Beau said, rubbing a hand over his face. "And they're welcome to stay here until they can rebuild." "That's very generous of you," Lillian said softly. Beau shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her praise. "It's what neighbors do." After breakfast, despite Martha's protests that she should rest, Lillian insisted on helping prepare for the Wilsons' arrival. She stripped beds and aired out rooms, working alongside Martha with a sense of purpose that kept her from dwelling on her own near tragedy. By midday, the Wilsons had arrived, a tired-looking man with his arm in a sling, his careworn wife, and 3 children including 10-year-old Tommy, who lit up at the sight of his teacher. "Miss Evans, did you get caught in the flood too?" he asked, his freckled face a mix of concern and excitement. "I did," Lillian admitted, kneeling to his level. "But Mr. Mitchell rescued me, just as your father kept all of you safe." Throughout the day, more families arrived seeking shelter or assistance. Some had lost homes. Others needed help rounding up scattered livestock. The Double M became a hub of activity, with Beau coordinating recovery efforts and Martha feeding what seemed like half the county. Lillian found herself unexpectedly useful, organizing the children into groups and keeping them occupied with stories and simple lessons while their parents dealt with more pressing concerns. She caught Beau watching her once as she sat surrounded by a circle of enraptured children, recounting the tale of Noah's Ark with appropriate dramatic flourishes. The warm appreciation in his eyes made her cheeks flush, and she nearly lost the thread of her story. That evening, after the children were settled and the adults gathered in small groups discussing rebuilding plans, Beau found Lillian on the porch, taking a moment of quiet for herself. "You have a gift with the little ones," he said, joining her at the railing. "They adore you." "Children are remarkably resilient," she replied. "They've lost homes and possessions, yet they can still laugh at a silly story." "A valuable lesson for all of us," Beau agreed, leaning against the porch post. In the lantern light, his profile was striking: strong jaw, straight nose, thoughtful eyes. "I've been thinking about how to get you back to town. The creek's still too high for crossing, but I could ride you around the long way tomorrow through the hills." "It would take most of the day, but actually," Lillian interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness, If it wouldn't be an imposition, I'd like to stay and help a bit longer. These children are my students and their families need all the assistance they can get. Beau studied her face for a moment, then smiled. It's no imposition at all. Truth is, you're a godsend with this many youngsters underfoot. Then it's settled, she said, returning his smile. Though I'll need to send word to Mrs. Holloway that I'm not lying dead in a ditch somewhere. I've already done better than that, Beau replied. Daniel managed to get through to town today. He brought back some of your things. He gestured to a small carpet bag resting near the door. Mrs. Holloway packed a few essentials when she heard you were staying to help. Lillian's eyes widened in surprise. That was very thoughtful of both of you. Well, much as that borrowed dress becomes you, I figured you might appreciate having your own clothing. The teasing compliment caught her off guard, and she felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Mr. Mitchell, I do believe you're flirting with me. Beau, he corrected her. And if I am, can you blame me? It's not every day a man pulls a beautiful schoolteacher from a raging flood. I'm hardly beautiful in this state, she protested, gesturing to her hastily pinned hair and the too large borrowed dress. I respectfully disagree, Beau said, his voice low and sincere. He stepped closer, and for a breathless moment Lillian thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. But I'm being presumptuous. Forgive me. Before she could respond, Martha called from inside that one of the children was asking for Miss Evans. The moment broken, Lillian excused herself, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with her near-drowning experience. Over the next few days, a routine developed. The waters slowly receded, allowing more travel between neighboring ranches. Beau rode out each day with his men to help with repairs and recovery, while Lillian established an impromptu school in the double empty-case dining room, maintaining some semblance of normalcy for the children. In the evenings, they would gather on the porch, sometimes with the other adults, sometimes just the two of them, talking long into the night. Beau told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding his horse breeding program, about the years he spent at university in Boston before his father's illness called him home to Texas. I never resented coming back, he explained one evening as they sat watching a spectacular sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. I loved my father and the ranch was always in my blood, but sometimes I missed the libraries, the concerts, the exchange of ideas. It must have been wonderful, Lillian said wistfully. St. Louis had its cultural attractions, but nothing like Boston. You should see it someday, Beau said, then added more quietly, perhaps I could show it to you. The suggestion hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Lillian's heart quickened, but before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Hank with news about a broken dam upstream. As April turned to May, the floodwaters fully receded, and the families sheltering at the Double M gradually returned to their homes or what remained of them. The Wilsons were the last to leave, moving into a small cabin on Beau's property until their own home could be rebuilt. The day came when there was no longer any practical reason for Lillian to remain at the ranch. Standing on the porch with her carpetbag in hand, she felt strangely reluctant to return to her room at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. I can't thank you enough for your hospitality, she told Beau as he prepared to drive her to town in his wagon. You've more than earned your keep, he replied, helping her onto the seat beside him. I don't know what we'd have done with all those children without you. The drive to Austin took nearly an hour, time filled with comfortable conversation and occasional companionable silence. When they reached Mrs. Holloway's house, a tidy two-story building on Pecan Street, Beau helped Lillian down from the wagon, holding her hand perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Will you come to dinner at the ranch this Sunday?" he asked suddenly. "Martha's been threatening to make her special apple pie, and she's taken quite a shine to you." "I'd like that very much," Lillian replied, pleased by the invitation. "Good," Beau said, relief evident in his voice. "I'll come for you around noon if that suits." "Perfectly." As Beau drove away, Lillian was greeted enthusiastically by Mrs. Holloway and the other boarders, all eager to hear about her adventure during the flood and subsequent stay at the famous Double M Ranch. She shared the basic facts, but kept certain details to herself, the way Beau looked in the firelight as he discussed Shakespeare, the feeling of his hand brushing hers as they reached for the same book, the warmth in his eyes when he watched her with the children. That Sunday was the first of many visits to the Double M. Sometimes Beau would bring her for dinner. Other times they would ride out to see the new foals or to picnic by a small lake on his property. Occasionally, he would come to town for the Sunday service at the church where Lillian sang in the choir, his tall form easy to spot in the congregation. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Austin in 1878 was not so large that the attentions of its most eligible bachelor could go unremarked. Lillian endured knowing looks from her landlady, teasing comments from her fellow teachers, and not a few envious glares from young ladies who had set their caps for Beau without success. None of this bothered her as much as the whispers that she was merely a passing fancy, that Beau Mitchell had never shown serious interest in any woman, and was unlikely to start now. These doubts crept into her mind during the quiet evenings alone in her room, making her question whether she was allowing herself to fall too deeply for a man who might never offer more than friendship. In late May, the school term ended, and Lillian faced a dilemma. She had been offered a renewal of her teaching position for the fall term, but without the school to occupy her days, she had little reason to remain in Austin through the summer. Part of her considered returning to St. Louis to visit old friends, but the thought of being away from Beau for months made her heart ache. The solution came unexpectedly. Martha, who had become something of a confidante, mentioned that she was struggling to manage the household with so many extra ranch hands hired for the summer work. "What I need is a capable young woman to help organize things," Martha sighed one Sunday after dinner. "Someone with a good head on her shoulders who can keep accounts and menus and such." Beau, overhearing, glanced at Lillian with sudden inspiration. "What about Miss Evans?" "She'll be at loose ends until the fall term, and she's certainly organized." Martha's eyes lit up. "Oh, would you consider it, dear? Just for the summer. There's a lovely room in the east wing that gets the morning sun, and the pay would be fair." Lillian hesitated, aware of how such an arrangement might appear to the gossiping tongues in town. "I'm not sure it would be proper." "Martha would be here as chaperone," Beau pointed out, "along with Mrs. Wilson and her family, and you'd be doing us a tremendous favor." The eagerness in his expression was hard to resist. "I suppose I could give Mrs. Holloway notice tomorrow," Lillian said slowly, already warming to the idea. "Wonderful," Martha exclaimed, patting her hand. "I'll have your room ready by Wednesday." On the ride back to town that evening, Beau seemed unusually quiet. As they approached Mrs. Holloway's house, he drew the wagon to a halt a little distance away. "I hope you didn't feel pressured about the summer position," he said, turning to face her. "If you'd rather return to St. Louis or have other plans, I don't," Lillian assured him. "Truly, it's a perfect arrangement. I need employment and you need help." "It's more than that," Beau said, his voice low and serious. "These past weeks, having you at the ranch, seeing you each day, it's meant a great deal to me, Lillian." Her heart fluttered at the intensity in his blue eyes. "It's meant a great deal to me as well," she admitted softly. Beau reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her despite the mild evening. "I don't want you to think I engineered this position merely to keep you close, though I can't deny I'm pleased by the prospect. But I would never want to compromise your reputation or take advantage." "Beau," she interrupted gently, "I know you wouldn't. And I'm choosing to accept the position of my own free will, with open eyes." Relief softened his features. "You're a remarkable woman, Lillian Evans." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a brief, tender kiss that ended almost as soon as it began, but left her breathless nonetheless. "I'll see you on Wednesday," he said, helping her down from the wagon. Lillian floated into Mrs. Holloway's house in a daze, her lips still tingling from Beau's kiss. For once, she didn't mind the knowing smile her landlady gave her when she announced she'd be moving to the Double M for the summer. The following Wednesday, Beau arrived with the wagon to transport Lillian and her belongings to the ranch. Her room in the east wing proved to be charming, spacious, and well-appointed, with large windows overlooking the rolling hills and a small adjoining sitting room where she could read or write letters. Life at the Double M quickly settled into a pleasant routine. Mornings were spent with Martha, planning meals and managing household accounts. Afternoons, Lillian often rode out with Beau to check on the various operations of the ranch or worked in the small ranch office, helping organize the breeding records and correspondence that had fallen into disarray since the former ranch manager left. The evenings were her favorite time. After dinner, she and Beau would often sit on the porch or in the great room, reading aloud to each other or discussing books, current events, or their pasts. Sometimes they were joined by the ranch hands or neighboring families, but Lillian treasured the nights when it was just the two of them, their conversations stretching long past the time when Martha and the others had retired. It was on one such evening in early June, as they sat on a blanket beneath the stars after a walk to the small lake, that Beau first told her he loved her. "I knew it that first day," he confessed, his fingers intertwined with hers as they gazed up at the constellation-filled Texas sky. "When I saw you in that tree, fighting so hard to survive, something in me recognized you as if I'd been waiting for you without knowing it. I thought I was hallucinating when you appeared," Lillian admitted with a small laugh. "Like a hero from some dime novel, riding out of the storm to rescue the damsel in distress." "Some hero," Beau said ruefully. "I was terrified I wouldn't reach you in time." "But you did," she reminded him, squeezing his hand, "and I've been falling in love with you every day since." His kiss this time was deeper, more assured, a promise rather than a question. When they finally broke apart, Lillian rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. "What happens at the end of summer?" she asked quietly. "When I return to teaching?" "I've been thinking about that," Beau replied, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "The ride to town takes nearly an hour each way. It seems terribly inefficient for the schoolteacher to travel so far every day." Lillian lifted her head to look at him, unsure where he was leading. "What are you suggesting?" "Well," he said, a smile playing at his lips, "it would be much more sensible if the school were closer. The Wilson children and others from neighboring ranches have to travel too far as it is. Beau Mitchell, are you proposing building a school on your property?" "Actually," he said, his expression growing more serious, "I'm proposing building a life together. I love you, Lillian. I want to marry you if you'll have me." Tears sprang to Lillian's eyes as joy flooded through her. "Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything," Beau said firmly. "When you nearly drowned that day, it made me realize how quickly life can change, how precious each moment is. I don't want to waste any more time pretending I'm not completely in love with you." "Then yes," Lillian whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you, Beau Mitchell." Their engagement announcement created quite a stir in Austin. Some expressed surprise at the speed of the courtship, while others claimed they'd predicted it from the moment Beau pulled Lillian from the floodwaters. The ladies' auxiliary of the church immediately began planning what promised to be the social event of the year, while Beau set about converting a small outbuilding on the ranch into a proper schoolhouse where Lillian could continue teaching the children from the surrounding properties. They were married on a perfect August day, beneath the same oak tree where Beau had first proposed. Lillian wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and Mrs. Wilson had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Beau, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, looked at her as if she were the only person in the world as she walked toward him on the arm of Hank, who had proudly agreed to give her away. The reception that followed was a true Texas celebration, with a feast prepared by Martha and the neighboring women, music provided by a fiddle band from town, and dancing that continued well into the night. When Beau and Lillian finally slipped away to the main house, now their shared home, they found that Martha had transformed their bedroom with fresh linens, candles, and scattered rose petals, a romantic touch that brought tears to Lillian's eyes. That night, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Beau whispered against her hair, "When I reached out to you in that flood, I had no idea I was reaching for my future." "I thought no one would rescue me," Lillian replied softly. "Not just from the flood, but from loneliness. You saved me in more ways than you know." As autumn approached, the small schoolhouse was completed, and Lillian began teaching a dozen children from the Double M and neighboring ranches. Beau's business continued to flourish, with his breeding program gaining recognition throughout Texas and beyond. Their first Christmas as husband and wife was a joyous occasion, with the house filled with greenery and the delicious scents of Martha's baking. They hosted a celebration for the ranch hands and neighboring families, establishing what would become a cherished annual tradition. In the spring of 1879, exactly 1 year after the flood that had brought them together, Lillian shared news that brought tears of joy to Beau's eyes. They would be welcoming a child in the autumn. "A flood baby," Beau joked, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Let's hope he or she doesn't inherit a penchant for natural disasters." "I don't know," Lillian teased back. "That flood brought me the greatest blessing of my life." Their son, James Thomas Mitchell, was born on a crisp October evening, with Martha serving as midwife and Beau pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the infant's first cry rang out. When Lillian placed the tiny bundle in his arms, Beau's expression of wonder and love was something she knew she would treasure forever. "He has your eyes," Beau whispered, gazing down at the alert blue eyes of his newborn son. "And your chin," Lillian replied with a tired smile. "Stubborn already." Little James quickly became the center of their world, though Lillian continued teaching with the baby often nestled in a basket beside her desk. The other children adored him, taking turns rocking his cradle or entertaining him while Lillian conducted lessons. As James grew, so did the Double M. Beau's breeding program expanded, with buyers coming from as far as Kentucky and California to purchase his horses. When James was 2, Beau built a larger schoolhouse to accommodate the increasing number of children in the area, officially hiring Lillian as the teacher with a proper salary that she insisted on donating to a fund for school supplies and books. Their family expanded again when James was 3, with the birth of their daughter, Alina Martha Mitchell, named for both Lillian's mother and the woman who had become like a mother to her in Texas. Unlike her calm, thoughtful brother, Eleanor was a whirlwind from the start, curious, bold, and determined to keep up with James in everything he did. Life was not without its challenges. A severe drought struck central Texas when James was 5, forcing Beau to make difficult decisions about culling his herd and selling off some of his prized breeding stock to ensure the ranch's survival. Lillian contracted scarlet fever the following winter, leaving her bedridden for weeks while Martha and Beau cared for the children and prayed for her recovery. Through it all, their love remained constant, a shelter in hard times, a joy multiplied in good ones. On quiet evenings, they would often sit on the porch swing Beau had built as a 5th anniversary gift, watching their children play in the yard as the Texas sun set behind the hills. "You ever regret it?" Beau asked one such evening as 7-year-old James taught 4-year-old Eleanor how to lasso a fence post. "Staying in Austin instead of returning to city life?" "Not for a moment," Lillian replied honestly. "Everything I need is right here." In 1887, nearly a decade after the flood that had changed their lives, Beau and Lillian welcomed their 3rd child, another son they named William Hank Mitchell, after Beau's father and the faithful foreman who had become like family. By then, the Double M had grown into one of the most successful ranches in the county, and the little schoolhouse had expanded into a proper school with 2 additional teachers helping Lillian educate the children from miles around. As the years passed, the story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. James, growing into a thoughtful young man with his father's build and his mother's love of books, would roll his eyes good-naturedly at the romantic details. Eleanor, adventurous and dramatic, demanded the tale repeatedly, especially the part where Beau reached through the rushing water and told Lillian to grab hold. Little William, with his mischievous smile, liked to act out the rescue with toy horses in the bathtub, much to Martha's dismay when water inevitably splashed onto the floor. On their 15th anniversary, Beau surprised Lillian with a journey to Boston, leaving the children in the capable hands of Martha and the now retired Hank. For 2 glorious weeks, they revisited the places Beau had known as a student, the libraries and museums, the concert halls and theaters. They walked the cobblestone streets hand in hand, taking pleasure in each other's company away from the responsibilities of the ranch and school. "Thank you for this," Lillian said as they stood on the deck of the ship that would carry them back to Texas. "It's been wonderful to see the world you knew before me." "I've enjoyed showing it to you," Beau replied, his arm around her waist, "but I find I'm eager to get home. Boston was my past. You, the children, the Double M, you're my present and future." When they returned to Austin, they found their family waiting at the train station, James tall and serious at 13, Eleanor vibrant and chattering at 10, 7-year-old William bouncing with excitement, and Martha beaming proudly behind them. The sight filled Lillian's heart to overflowing. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had grown quiet, Beau and Lillian stood on the porch, gazing up at the same stars that had witnessed their first declaration of love so many years before. "You remember that day in the flood?" Beau asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "When I said grab hold, of course," Lillian replied, leaning into his embrace. "It was the moment everything changed. I was so afraid you'd slip away," he confessed, "that I wouldn't be strong enough to hold on. But you were," she reminded him, turning to face him. At 45, Beau's face showed the lines of years spent working outdoors, and silver threaded through his dark hair, but his blue eyes still held the same warmth that had captured her heart. "You've never let go." "And I never will," he promised, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown that first time on the porch of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. As they stood wrapped in each other's arms, Lillian thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment from a rain-swollen creek, where she'd believed herself beyond saving, to this life rich with love and purpose. Sometimes the most devastating floods, she reflected, could wash you exactly where you needed to be. In the years that followed, the Mitchell family continued to thrive. James, inheriting his father's business acumen and love of horses, gradually took on more responsibility at the ranch, introducing modern breeding techniques he'd learned during his studies at Texas A&M. Eleanor, to no one's surprise, became the first woman from the county to attend university, returning with a teaching degree to work alongside her mother at what had become known as the Mitchell School. William, combining his father's ranching skills with an unexpected talent for architecture, designed and built additions to the main house and several innovative barns that drew admiration from ranchers throughout the state. As Beau and Lillian moved into their golden years, they found new joy in grandchildren: James's twins, Robert and Rebecca, Eleanor's 3 spirited daughters, and later, William's son and daughter. The house that had once sheltered them during that long-ago flood now echoed with the laughter of a new generation. In 1918, 40 years after Beau had reached through rushing water to save a struggling schoolteacher, they celebrated their anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends. Martha, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, presented them with a quilt she had secretly made, each square representing a year of their marriage: the schoolhouse, the births of their children, the drought, the trip to Boston, weddings and graduations, joys and sorrows, all stitched together with love. "I never thought I'd cry over a blanket," Beau said gruffly, blinking back tears as he ran his weathered hand over the intricate stitching. "It's not just a blanket," Lillian corrected him gently. "It's our life together." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and family members drifted off to their rooms or homes, Beau and Lillian found themselves alone on the porch swing that had witnessed so many of their quiet conversations over the decades. 40 years, Beau marveled, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you clinging to that tree. And sometimes it feels like I've never known any other life," Lillian replied, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart, slower now but as strong and true as ever. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't ridden that way that day?" Beau asked. "If the flood hadn't come, or if you'd managed to make it back to town on your own?" Lillian considered this for a moment. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," she said finally. "Perhaps at a church social or a town meeting. Some souls are meant to connect, whatever path they take." Beau smiled, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "My practical, romantic wife, you're probably right." "I usually am," she teased, patting his knee affectionately. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, 2 figures silhouetted against the warm light from the house they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the home it represented, the family it had nurtured, the love that had begun with a hand extended in desperate circumstances and had grown into something enduring and profound. The flood that had nearly claimed Lillian's life had instead given her everything she'd never dared to hope for: a partner who cherished her mind as well as her heart, children who carried the best of both of them into the world, work that fulfilled her deepest purpose, and a community that had become true home. And it had all started with those simple words, "Grab hold," spoken by a man who had never let go. In the quiet of the night, with the stars shining overhead and the sounds of their sleeping family surrounding them, Beau and Lillian held each other close, grateful for the storm that had brought them together and the love that had weathered all seasons.